So having our own pathway in New Zealand to be able to treat patients and then bring these products to market is something that's quite valuable for us in our whole biotech industry as well.
Kia ora team, Richard Liew here, editor at nzentrepreneur.co.nz. Almost forgot. Today I'm talking with Julie Jones. She's the founder at BioValeo, a new clinical research organisation. She's joining us from Wellington today. Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Richard. It's great to be here today.
Now, for people who don't know what a clinical research organisation is, can we start with that?
Yes, absolutely. So we're usually called a CRO, and a CRO stands for a contract research organisation. So we provide clinical research services that support sponsors, and a sponsor is an organisation who wants to run a clinical trial. So they might have a product that they want to run through a trial, or they might even just have an idea to test a service. So it's whoever's responsible overall for that study. So we support them to run a clinical trial. So we can help them with their planning, their setup, and to actually conduct the trial as well. So we as a CRO, we have a really broad depth of experience, and we're able to deliver lots of different types of trials, so across different phases. So trials are split into 4 phases. Phase 1 is your first into human, and then your phase 4 is once you've basically marketed the product and you're looking at real world evidence. So we can do all those phases, and we also have lots of experience across different medical indications and different types of treatments. So you might have a drug product or a device product, or in our case, we're looking at cell therapies as well.
So of course, getting any sort of medicine or medical devices to the market, we want to know as users and health carers that whatever is available is up to standard, right? It's not going to hurt us in any way. It's going to do what it's supposed to do. And I can imagine the amount of work that needs to go into going from some sort of new sort of breakthrough or research which may lead to a new medicine, for example. But we want to know that, man, there's going to be some stringent sort of rigor and testing that it has to go through. So the people who, what might be some real life or tangible examples of things that you're working on at the moment, for example, just to give our viewers a bit more context?
So our company, BioValeo, we're particularly focused on the precision medicine, which is also known as personalised medicine space. So we are wanting to run clinical trials, or we are running clinical trials on cellular therapies and gene editing, gene therapies and immunotherapy. And our particular focus is in the CAR T cell therapy space at the moment, which is just a really new and exciting and incredibly, well, so far successful space internationally. And New Zealand already has one study running through the Melbourne Institute, and we're looking to expand and be able to grow and attract more CAR T cell studies to New Zealand, and just offer that to patients who don't currently have any other options, or they just don't have access to it, those treatments. The CAR T cell studies are very expensive, or the treatments are very expensive for patients, and it's really outside of the reach of many New Zealand patients to be able to access that. So bringing more studies to New Zealand in this space will allow a lot more equity as well for patients within New Zealand, and we'll hopefully work with the health system to be able to deliver those studies. We could also work with private institutes if we need to, but it's just, it provides so much opportunity for patients, and also allows New Zealand researchers a pathway to be able to bring their products to market and also have access to patients.
Right. And my understanding is that CAR T cell therapies are sort of breakthrough in the area of cancer, fighting cancers.
They've been very successful in treating cancers, especially blood-borne cancers, because they've got specific targets. So the new area that people are looking into are solid tumours. It's a little bit harder to get the right target for that, but there are a whole lot of studies coming through, and we're in fact looking at some solid tumour studies at the moment to bring to New Zealand. There are all sorts of other indications as well. I mean, I've heard of them coming in through cardiac damage, hair loss. So it's not just oncology. So you can actually do things in many different areas. So it's a matter of stimulating the immune system in the right way to be a lot more specific, rather than that sort of generic one-size-fits-all treatment for patients, which may work in many cases and for many patients, but doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So with the CAR T cells, at the moment, we're still looking at autologous treatments, which means making the product from the patient's own leukapheresis blood cells and then manipulating them in the lab and then giving them back to the patient. So running these types of studies are a lot more complex than just running a standard study, and there are a lot more issues and management requirements around logistics and manufacturing and the actual running and conduct of the study. And we've got some incredible doctors in New Zealand that we're working with to try and bring this to the patients. And they're so motivated, and it's going to be fantastic to actually work with them going forward. Awesome.
And so for developers of these medicines, devices in New Zealand, so biotech companies working on these sorts of solutions and technologies, what would they normally have to do, like in the absence of, say, a CRO such as BioValeo being around?
It's as you said earlier, it's an incredibly challenging environment. You need to have some very specialist knowledge on how to run trials. We're very, very heavily regulated. So there's ethical standards that we need to meet, and there are regulatory standards that you need to meet, but you really need to be sure that you've designed your study properly and that you've got vendors that are appropriate and that you've validated all those vendors. You validated the CRO, so groups like ourselves need to meet certain standards as well. We need to work to the international standards, so ICH-GCP, good clinical practice standards. And for most of our clients, they're also trying to work to the EMA, so European and the FDA, American guidelines as well, to ensure that their products are actually able to be provided to patients in the future. So everything in the clinical trial needs to be documented rigorously. You need to make sure that you've adhered to all the compliance requirements. Everything has to be auditable. Everybody has to be trained sufficiently, and your product has to be the same every time, which also brings in complexity for the manufacturing for CAR Ts. So it's a really complex environment to be in. And if you haven't done a clinical trial before, it's incredibly difficult for somebody to try and navigate all those different aspects. So it's always worth, even if people need to try and do some of it themselves, if they can get somebody to help with some of their guidance, that would be certainly a recommendation at the very least.
To me, it sounds like a heck of a job. But what I'm hearing is that, having the technology is the one thing, so some new treatment or drug that you're working on. But then it's that second part, that whole regulation part and getting it across the line, that could actually make or break whether or not how successful something is, right? And at the end of the day, whether or not it's going to have the impact that maybe the developers hope that they would have.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could run a study and you've just not got things done correctly. Your data's not going to be good enough, and it could all be thrown out. It's not worth anything. You have to repeat that study. So you want to get it right the first time. You want to capture all the data that's going to be required for the regulators to be able to assess that product properly. And timelines are really critical as well in this industry, because quite often people are competing against another organisation that has a similar idea. So the first to market is always important for a company that's pumping, hundreds of millions quite often into these products. I mean, the big pharmas, it's huge amounts. So New Zealand, we need to kind of compete against those big players as well. So having our own pathway in New Zealand to be able to treat patients and then bring these products to market is something that's quite valuable for us in our whole biotech industry as well.
And talking about New Zealand biotech industry as a whole, what are some of the things that you see, I don't know, in terms of roadblocks or obstacles, for New Zealand biotech companies into, becoming world leaders, getting their products out there, growing?
Well, there's a few that both do and don't affect us. So the manufacturing is always a complexity for New Zealand companies. Trying to get a GMP product, a certified product, into a trial is very difficult. and costly step for a lot of the sponsors to try and get their product ready for trials. So I think more support in that area would help them to be able to bring more products to trial in New Zealand. And for us, once we get into trial, we then have to work with either the DHBs. For oncology, we really want to work with the hospital groups, because those patients need a lot more care and they need a lot more complex care with different providers as well. So they might need a solid tumor oncologist, they might need a hematologist as well, a neurologist, and a few other groups working together to really make sure that the patient's cared for and there's the best safety profile for that product and that patient. It's all about the patient and making sure the patient is safe on a trial. And we also are able to work with private organisations. So there are some really great phase 1 and 2 units in New Zealand that can help deliver early entry products, but not really in the really complex space for clinical trials yet, so oncology. But moving forward, we're going to hopefully build up that space a lot more so we can work with the sites and the investigators to be able to actually provide these trials to the patients across New Zealand as well. So actually, we're really working on trying to have better equity across trials as well. So as in not just everything in Auckland, not Wellington. So actually enabling patients to be able to access trials in a way that's better for them and their family life as well. So across New Zealand, it's called sort of decentralised trials.
Looking ahead to the next sort of 12 to 18 months for yourselves, what's on the horizon? What are some of the things you want to tick off?
Well, for us, we have a lot of documentation and systems that we're putting in place and getting it all validated, because for us, everything has to be, every T is crossed and every I is dotted and everything has to be very rigorously documented and secured. And so we've got that as establishing our company, and we're most of the way through that now, and then bringing on some studies. We've got a couple of studies in CAR-T that we're looking at starting later this year or early next year. And we've got a few other studies in sort of the vaccine space, immunotherapy space as well, that we're working on bringing in. So we're still early sort of startup phase, but ready to go as well. So just moving on to starting those studies now.
Awesome, cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's a great place to wrap it up. That was Julie Jones, founder and CEO at BioValeo. Julie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me, Richard.